The last thing you smell before a billion-dollar warship dies is burning copper wire. Not smoke, not fire, copper, sharp and metallic, like someone's soldering iron just touched your tongue. That smell means something in the electrical guts of this destroyer just quit, and every experienced sailor on board knows, before the alarms even sound, that the next few minutes will either be a drill they laugh about later or the worst night of their lives. The lights don't go out all at once. They stutter. First, the fluorescents flicker in the passageways below deck. Then the radar screen on the bridge fades to black. Then silence. Not peaceful silence. The silence of a 9,000-ton warship holding its breath. Here's what civilians never see on the news. A U.S. Navy destroyer carries enough firepower to level a city block. It can intercept ballistic missiles screaming down from the edge of space. It can hunt submarines and call down tomahawk strikes from 1,000 miles away. But the moment its power goes out, and it does go out, none of that matters. That ship becomes a $2.7 billion steel island, drifting, defenseless, at the mercy of whatever the ocean decides to throw at it next. 300 sailors are now in the dark, and whatever's out there in that water doesn't know the lights are out. It just knows the ship stopped moving. Stay with me, because what happens inside that hull in the next 45 seconds determines whether everyone goes home. Today, we're going deep inside one of the most classified and least discussed emergencies in the U.S. Navy. Not a missile strike, not a torpedo, a blackout at sea. A total loss of power on a guided missile destroyer in the middle of the open ocean. This isn't rare. This isn't theoretical. It has happened to some of the most advanced ships in our fleet, the USS Fitzgerald, the USS Detroit, the USS Freedom, and in one of those cases, 7 American sailors never came home. By the time this is over, you're going to understand exactly what those crews faced, the procedures they followed, the split-second decisions that kept 300 men and women alive, and the one system running on a 45-second clock that stands between a U.S. warship and total catastrophe. Before we go there, if you've served on a destroyer, a cruiser, or any U.S. Navy vessel, drop the name of your ship in the comments right now. This one's for you. Let's start with the basics, because once you understand how a destroyer is powered, you'll understand exactly why losing that power is so catastrophic. An Burke-class destroyer, the backbone of today's U.S. Navy surface fleet, doesn't run on one engine. It runs on a combination of massive gas turbine engines and diesel generators. Think of it like a flying city that happens to float. Every radar array, every weapon system, every communication terminal, every pump that keeps seawater from flooding the lower decks, all of it runs off electrical power generated on board. There is no extension cord back to shore. Under normal operations, the ship runs multiple generators simultaneously in what engineers call parallel operation. If one trips offline, another picks up the load before the crew even notices a flicker. The system is designed to be redundant, designed to be bulletproof. But here's the sailor's truth that no recruitment poster will ever show you. The ocean doesn't care about your design spec. A blackout happens when the generation or distribution of that power fails, and fails faster than the backup systems can compensate. The causes range from mechanical failure and overheating to a blown circuit breaker pulling too much load too fast. In combat conditions, it can be battle damage. And sometimes, like on the USS Fitzgerald in 2017, it starts with something as mundane as an accidental fire in a single switchboard panel, a spark, and within hours, a $1.8 billion destroyer is limping into port with dead sailors in her berthing compartments. That's the thing about power failure at sea. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It creeps, and then all at once it arrives. So what happens in those first moments after the lights go out? The bridge goes to immediate emergency protocol. The engine telegraph, the control that tells the engine room what speed you need, gets slammed to stop because a ship with no power and no steering that's still moving forward is a missile with no guidance system. You kill the momentum first. Simultaneously, down in the engine room, the chief engineer is already moving. Fuel levers go to zero on the main propulsion plant. If an auxiliary boiler was running, the main steam valve gets shut to preserve pressure. And then, every set of eyes in that engine room locks onto one thing: the emergency generator. By international maritime regulation, every warship must carry a dedicated emergency generator, completely separate from the ship's main power plant. And that generator has one job, with one non-negotiable standard. It must come online and reach full operational load within 45 seconds of total power loss. 45 seconds. That's not a suggestion. That's a survival requirement. But here's what the emergency generator is not. It is not a full replacement for the ship's main power. It's a lifeline. It powers only the most critical systems. Navigation lights, so other ships can see you and don't run you over in the dark. VHF and satellite communications, so you can call for help. GPS, so you know where you are. Fire suppression alarms, so a secondary disaster doesn't compound the first. And critically, steering. Everything else is dark. The Aegis radar, the missile systems, the sonar, the combat information center, all of it gone, dead, silent. The Navy calls this state a vessel not under command. Out on the open ocean, other ships are legally required to give you way. You raise a specific signal, 2 red lights, one above the other, that tells every vessel in the area, this ship cannot maneuver. Stay clear. But the ocean doesn't read signal lights, and enemy submarines don't care about maritime law. Now here's something I want you to sit with for a second before we move on. What's the one meal you could never live without if you were stuck at sea for months with no hot food, no electricity, and no sunlight? Drop it in the comments, because in a real blackout scenario, even the galley goes dark.
Here's the thing nobody tells you about a destroyer blackout, and this is the part that genuinely surprised even some retired Navy veterans when they first read the incident reports. The danger isn't the darkness, it isn't even the drifting. The danger is the sequence, because a blackout doesn't just flip one switch. It triggers a cascade, a chain reaction of failing system that compounds itself every single minute the main power stays down. And buried in the official Navy engineering operational sequencing system, the classified playbook for exactly this scenario, is a recovery sequence so precise, so demanding, that a crew that hasn't drilled it until its muscle memory will fumble it under pressure. In 2013, the USS Nimitz, one of America's most iconic aircraft carriers, suffered an electrical fire while deployed in the Indian Ocean. The ship's firefighting teams stepped up. The crew worked to maintain operation. They held it together, but that was a carrier with a nuclear reactor and a crew of 5,000. A destroyer has 300 souls and about 45 seconds. Let's talk about what those 300 sailors actually do.
The recovery from a naval blackout is one of the most demanding technical performances in all of military service, and it happens in the dark, on a rolling deck, with adrenaline flooding every vein, while the bridge is managing the ship's position and calling out navigational hazards. The engineering team below is executing a sequence that has to happen in exactly the right order. Start things in the wrong sequence, and you risk a second, worse failure. Start things too fast, and you blow the emergency generator trying to carry a load it was never designed for. First,
The main engine's lube oil pump gets restarted because without lubrication, those massive turbines seize, and you've just turned a repairable situation into a permanent one. Then the jacket water pump. Then, carefully and methodically, systems are brought back online in priority order, not all at once, not randomly, but deliberately, like a surgeon reopening a patient. The whole time, the officer on the bridge is tracking the ship's drift using GPS on battery backup, one of the few systems that stays alive in any condition. They're watching the chart, watching the water around them, watching for the lights of other vessels getting too close. Because here's the reality of drifting in open ocean on a dead ship. You are not alone out there. Commercial shipping lanes cross the Pacific like highways. Container ships, some of them 30 to 40 times the mass of a destroyer, are moving through those lanes at 20 knots. They have radar, they have lookouts, but at night, in bad weather, a dead destroyer with no running propulsion and no active radar signature can be almost invisible until it's too late. The USS Fitzgerald found out exactly how that ends. On June 17, 2017, at 1:30 in the morning, that destroyer was on a mission in the South China Sea when the MV ACX Crystal, a cargo ship more than 3 times its size, gouged an opening bigger than a semi-truck in the Fitzgerald's starboard hull. The force of the impact sent the warship into a full 360-degree spin. Flooding water hit the berthing compartments in seconds. 7 sailors died in the rooms where they slept. Dozens more were physically and psychologically wounded. And the bitter footnote to that story, the detail that still makes retired commanders furious, is that almost 2 weeks earlier, an accidental fire in one of the Fitzgerald switchboards had knocked the ship's power out completely. The destroyer went dark, dead in the water. It limped into port for repairs. The problems were not fully resolved. The crew was already fatigued, already stretched thin. And then, weeks later, the cargo ship came out of the dark. 7 men paid for that with their lives. The Navy launched sweeping investigations after the Fitzgerald disaster and the nearly identical USS John S. McCain collision that followed just 2 months later. 10 more sailors dead. What they found was a surface fleet being pushed beyond its limits, ships spending more time deployed than they spent in training, maintenance deferred because the operational tempo never slowed down, crews that were exhausted before they ever left port. A 2025 Congressional Budget Office report confirmed what many veterans already knew in their gut. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are now spending an average of 9 years of their service lives in maintenance and overhaul, more than double what the Navy originally planned. Maintenance costs per destroyer hit $28 million annually in 2024. That's 3 times what it cost in 2009. The deployable fleet, the ships that are actually out there, ready, mission capable, is significantly smaller than the raw ship count suggests. And yet, those crews keep going. They keep sailing. They keep standing watch on 4-hour sleep rotations, running drills for scenarios exactly like this one, maintaining a state of readiness that most Americans will never fully appreciate because most Americans never see it. Do you think you could handle the 4-hour sleep shifts of a destroyer crew, 12 hours on, 4 off, for weeks at a stretch, in all weather, with the constant knowledge that a switchboard fire or a generator failure could put you in the dark at any moment? Drop your answer in the comments. Now, let's talk about what the Navy is doing to make sure the next generation of destroyers never faces this exact vulnerability. Because the answer to all of this, the catastrophic cascades, the power dependency, the fragility of current electrical systems, is already being built. The Navy's next-generation destroyer, the DDG-X, is designed around a completely new integrated power system, an architecture that doesn't just generate electricity, it manages it at a level current destroyers can't touch. More electrical capacity, more redundancy, built-in accommodation for directed energy weapons, lasers that require massive,
stable power draws that today's destroyers simply cannot sustain. The DDG-X is projected to displace 14,500 tons, nearly 50% more mass than an Arleigh Burke, and carry that extra mass specifically to house the systems that will make power failure a relic of the past. But the DDG-X won't be in the water until the early 2030s at the earliest. Until then, the men and women on those Arleigh Burke hulls are doing what American sailors have always done. They're holding the line. They're drilling that 45-second sequence until it's carved into their hand. They're memorizing every circuit, every breaker, every backup system on their ship, because they know that somewhere between here and the next port, the ocean might decide to test them, and they'll be ready.
There's a signal in the U.S. Navy, 2 red lights, one above the other. That means a ship can no longer maneuver. It means the crew is fighting for survival. It means we need time. Every sailor who has ever stood watch on a destroyer understands what those lights mean, not as an abstract concept, as a lived reality, as something they practiced for, something they trained for, something they committed their youth and their safety, and sometimes their lives, to being ready for. The next time you see a Navy destroyer in a photograph, that long gray hull cutting through open water, I want you to think about what's happening inside that hull. The generators running in parallel, the engineers on watch, the bridge team scanning the horizon, the blackout drill that happened at 3 a.m. last Tuesday that nobody filmed, nobody posted, nobody tweeted about. That ship doesn't just represent American firepower. It represents American will, the willingness of 300 ordinary men and women to go to extraordinary places and stand between this nation and whatever's coming. Which of these Navy traditions, the 45-second emergency protocol, the 4-hour sleep rotations, or the signal lights that mean we're not under command, surprised you the most? Let us know below. And if this kind of deep dive, real tribute to the men and women of our Navy is something you value, hit subscribe, because we're not done telling their stories. Not by a long shot.